Hello. Chairman Smith said we'll just be a little late starting. She's got something to do, so just be at ease for a few minutes, please.
Giving us a little time here. Check your calendars. Is it March the 15th? I'm just curious. It is for me today. So if y'all don't know that, read Shakespeare. So anyway. Yeah. Call the meeting to order, and Representative Gasway will open us with a prayer.
Father in heaven, thank you for this day. Thank you for this opportunity to come here and work for the good of the citizens of Georgia. Forgive us of our sins. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen.
Amen. Thank you. This committee meeting is going to be in two parts, so to speak. The first part is to look at a piece of legislation that's gone through our committee process, and it has to do with the Stewardship Act. But I wanted to take a chair's privilege here for a minute, if I can find it. Back in 2005, it was the first year I chaired our committee. I was asked by Governor Perdue to carry his first initiative, which had to deal with conservation. And so it has been several years now that this body, the General Assembly, has taken active positions on conservation for the state of Georgia. And I just wanted to have that little introduction interlude to when we do our committee reports. So it was House Bill 98, and Robbie Rivers was the chair. Robbie Rivers was the clerk of the House, and he had such a wealth of knowledge. I had no idea what had happened, but he said this is significant and saved that because the first action of a Republican-held House and Senate and the Republican governor was to pass a Conservation Act. So I do want to make that point because we're having some discussions today about some issues that at times are divisive, but I think it reflects on the importance of our wonderful state and our stewardship, and the fact that this first Conservation Act is now being shaped and reshaped as just we're a living document and as we're moving forward. But anyway, this is from Robbie Rivers, clerk of the House, and he gave me the documents, copies of the documents from the clerk's office. January 26, 2005. First committee report filed and first bill favorably reported during the 2005 session of the new majority. Robbie Rivers. So I think it's time to pause here when we look at our role as legislators and what we do and how difficult sometimes our issues are, that we in fact always try and move forward in what is the best interest of the state. Sometimes we hit bumps in the road. Sometimes we have to steer right and left as we try and solve our problems. But I think the overall work of the General Assembly as a whole goes and has been going in a very positive direction. And I believe now I need to call on my chair of Resource Management for a report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Subcommittee on Resource Management on Monday, February 27th, met and considered HB 332 by Representative Watson of the 172nd, and we do have a do pass recommendation on that piece of legislation.
Thank you. And we have the bill's author here. So we're going to put you at that table, yes. And will you please present for us your bill? And will you give us the bill number and the LC number so we can be sure we're on the right bill?
Thank you, Madam Chair, members of the committee. Today I bring before you HB 332, LC number 401372. Is that right?
We hope it's right. That's what we have. If not, we're going to be passing the
Okay.
wrong bill, so
We
or
have had
debating
a
the
few
wrong
changes
bill.
along the way, so. But thank y'all for letting me be here today. This is the Georgia Outdoor Stewardship Act. And basically what we're doing here, you know, Georgia's been blessed with a lot of growth in the last several years. And we've had great leadership of this state.
Chairs, if you will speak to the bill right now, that is not the correct bill. So, again, March the 15th. So anyway, it's, we will wait for LC number 41480S, but it does not mean you can't present the bill to us, and we'll get copies to our committee members if you will just be specific as to where the changes are in the legislation.
Okay. I'm sorry about that. But as I was saying, because of our great leadership with our governor and our DNR commissioner, we've done a lot over the last several years to protect our natural resources and create a balance between our economic growth and our natural resources. So what we're trying to do in this bill is make sure we continue that legacy for those leaders and for this state, so that we can continue to maintain our natural resources with the growth that we've had over the last several years. Some of the reasons that we've brought this about is obviously endangered species. We've had, you know, the gopher tortoise, as you may be familiar with, is one of the animals that is possibly could be put on the endangered species list, and this type legislation will help make sure that that endangered species does not get put on that federal endangered species list. And if it did, we would also have a lot of economic development problems along the way with that, I think on the economic side and on the agricultural side. Our military bases is another reason that we've had conversations with this bill, and protecting those military bases and the space that they need due to the conversations of base closures. We need to make sure that we have the revenue available to make sure that the buffers that they have are necessary and adequate to make sure that they remain open. But all that being said, this money would be used for land conservation, land acquisition, wildlife protection, anything we need in the natural resources realm to make sure that we protect the environment, we protect wildlife. That being said, the revenue would be generated from the sales of recreational items. We would be taking 75% of the 4% collected from recreational items. You have several documents in your packet, and I think one of them kind of breaks it down for you, or at least I hope you have that in your packet. if you'll see, there's the items listed. We're not talking about the big ticket items, the boats and RTVs. We're talking about fishing tackle, hunting gear, wildlife, watching equipment, the very small items. As you can see, it kind of breaks it down through the process. You also have another handout that kind of shows what's going on around the country with programs like this, to where dedicated funding is committed to natural resources. And as you can see on that one, everybody around us is doing this in some shape, form, or fashion. You can also see that it's estimated that this will generate around $40 million for our natural resources, to be dedicated to make sure that we continue the legacy that we've had so far. As far as the changes that we have made, I think, along the way, I know originally we had the income would be managed by state properties. It's now being placed under GFA. But the new LC number I think that you have is got all that in there. But other than that, I don't.
We're in the process of having that.
Okay,
And I do believe you're correct. The change was going from state properties to GFA.
that's right. But that's pretty much what it does. That's why we're doing it. And I would appreciate everybody's support. I think this is a huge piece of legislation that's going to be great for our state, to make sure that we continue what we've been doing this far. We're not going to be here forever, and we want to make sure that we protect our natural resources for our children and our grandchildren. And I appreciate y'all letting me be here this morning, and I'll take any questions.
Thank you. I think at this point in time, I'll go ahead and call up, he's not knowing I'm doing this to him, but our GFA director, Kevin Clark, if you will come on, just come up and explain the process that you would use in GFA. So, have you had coffee yet? This is your shot of Java right here. The reason you're the GFA is our funding agency. That's basically what you need to explain, I think. Thank you, Director Clark.
Our history with the program that you referenced earlier, the Georgia Land Conservation Program and Council, I think helps us and enables us to be a good place for those funds to be dispersed. But it wouldn't be solely at GFA's discretion. This is all within DNR and the governor and others arriving at the projects that would be selected based on the criteria that's in the statute. So for us, this is much more of just a management of the funds, which is what we traditionally do with our loan programs, and on those occasions when we do get grant funds, do that. So it's not out of our wheelhouse for that type of work. So, but as far as the details, I don't think we have those, I don't think anybody's really worked on those yet, other than what the law says. And I think that's carried over from the prior statute about the 10 criteria that would be looked at.
I want to thank you very much. And I did not know that this aspect would come up, but I thought it important to reassure our committee there is a process in place, and how this conservation program has worked for years. And then in my statement, it's just being raised to a different level now. And you're one of our unsung agencies that does an awful lot of work for our state. And whenever I can give a shout out to y'all, I like to do that. So I really do appreciate what you do. And our local governments would have a lot more trouble if they didn't have GFA. I know, shucks, right. Okay.
No, I appreciate it, and we appreciate it. I think, going back to back to 2005, when we had that influx of money for grants, and then the loan program that we administer out of the Clean Water State Revolving Fund, the federal program, I think lays a good basis for what's going to happen going forward. So, at least that part from the administration won't be novel. We can handle that.
Thank you. Thank you. I don't believe there'll be, well, I'm starting to get questions, so just stay put. But I want to go back to our bill's author. Were you speaking to LC 148OS, or do you have a copy of that now? Okay. That would help. I think that might help you. Again, while we're waiting with this interim here, I can't emphasize enough that it has been the will of this General Assembly for years now to be good stewards of our natural resources and good managements of our funds. The change to the legislation, it really is to go from state properties, which would not be a management tool, to GFA, which is the management tool. So at this point in time, I will entertain questions in number 23.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I was just looking at the substitute, Representative Watson, you and I talked a little bit in subcommittee about this, and I'm still a little bit hazy. And I really do appreciate your work on this and bringing this forward, and I am very supportive of our efforts. But I'm trying to get a little better handle on what is included and what is not included as far as the categories of outdoor equipment and whatnot. I know in the package that we have in front of us, this page has in bold the following are not eligible for sales tax apportionment, and it lists special equipment and other equipment with some individual items there. And then this sheet is in our package. The equipment, auxiliary equipment, special equipment, other equipment, some in red, some in black, and then I see a definition in the bill. I thought I saw a definition in the bill of outdoor recreation equipment on line 51. Can you sort of reconcile those pieces as an avid consumer of outdoor products of all kind? I'm just trying to figure out when I buy something, what part of my money will be going into the general fund and which portions may be going into this fund.
Well, as far as this part goes, I think this is some language that we've copied from these other 30 or so states that they've been using as far as what items qualify. When you look at this handout, and it talks about the big ticket items will not be included. It also mentions the Pittman Robinson funds at the bottom, in which those are federal excise taxes that are collected on those versus we're talking about sales tax revenues, in which that money has to be matched on your ammunition and guns. So I don't have a specific list, but basically this is what it is right here is the your big ticket items, boats, four-wheelers, and stuff like that are not part of this, but your fishing tackle and hunting clothes and wildlife binoculars and the smaller items are where we're at.
Follow up, Madam Chair.
Yes.
To that point, at this point in time, do we know who would be responsible for developing those specific lists of what would be in the fund and not in the fund?
I do not, but I do have some people here with me that may want to come up and assist me with some of those technicalities.
And I see someone
may,
might have an
Madam Chair.
answer to that as well. Representative Nimmers, are you number 14? Yes. Could you speak to that while we're getting more people to come up?
Thank you, Madam Chair. Representative Williams, I believe that is the list right here that we're referencing from line 51. If you come over to the list that's already been generated, I believe that is it. When you talk about auxiliary equipment and equipment, taking away the big ticket items of equipment, that list is already produced and generated.
Point of
so,
clarification, is that list available? Is that in the packet that was handed out?
Yes,
Could you
ma'am.
reference our committee members to where it is to help them?
Well, I've kind of shuffled my papers
Okay,
all
so
around,
shuffle
Madam
your
Chair.
papers. What does it look like? So it's got red and it says
Yeah.
draft
It's,
on it.
Everything
it's
in
in red
red.
writing. It'll jump at you.
Okay.
Kind of like my test papers I used to get back.
Okay. I will tell you, having had experience passing for years, the schools, our sales tax holiday and our energy tax holiday, that the Department of Revenue has a big role to play in developing these lists, and that's the list we have here, I believe. Okay, back to our presenter, and please identify your person who's going to answer our question. Thank you. And I see number 25 has a question as well. I'll get to you in a minute. Yeah,
Madam
yes.
Chair, Thomas Farmer with the Nature Conservancy here in Georgia. Just to thank you for the opportunity to say a few words and to clarify, if I may. But Mr. Nimmer already did so. I think effectively, what you have in red is what would be included in this bill. At the bottom, there you see special equipment and other equipment, which is in black. Those would not be included in this. Where this data comes from is from every 5 years, the Department of Interior, Fish and Wildlife Service, and the Department of Commerce.
You're referring to the federal government.
Federal
okay.
government does a survey, and these are their definitions and how they classify this, these different items. So, and it is Representative Watson said it is representative of what Texas, in fact, does and what Virginia does.
Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Number 25, identify yourself.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Representative Cohen, District 97. Going to commend you. I'm very, very supportive of this and think it's a great idea. But I want to my question, are we, as we did with the teacher educators tag, as we did with the tire tax and all that, what is the guarantee that this money, I mean, I think it should, that the money will go where I'm voting I want it to go, and I assume for years that it's going that way. Is it going to go there? And what's the guarantee?
Well, I think it's gonna go to GFA, and
But I mean, is when we collect it, like tire tax, we send it to them. The educators tax, I mean, is this going to be enough that we can shift it and not put it in there? Put it in the regular budget, or is it guaranteed?
It'll be guaranteed, because this will be a constitutional amendment.
I see that, yes, so that's the guarantee right there.
That right, that the
That's
people
why I
are
just
gonna
wanna
make
sure.
that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much.
Yes, sir.
Are there any other questions? The chair will entertain, this is the proper time, I'll put it that way. Yes, number 14?
Thank you, Madam Chair. I want to take a point of personal privilege and just thank the author, the sponsor of the bill, and all the groups moving together. I think one thing you can look at is this list of sponsors and I'll reference for a visual aid here to the committee members. And this isn't a shot at any group. I want you to hear me when I say this, but when you get this mixture of people supporting a measure, you can see that the overall intent here is to have something to conserve. We may all differ down the road in the weeds about how to conserve, but if we don't have anything to start with, it doesn't matter. This is an exceptional effort that's been a long time coming, and I'm just tickled with the work that Representative Watson's done and all the groups that have come together and this committee's input on it. And Madam Chair, I'm excited to cast a vote for this today.
Are you going to translate that further into a
Can I?
statement?
Is this the appropriate
This
time?
is the appropriate time.
Well, Madam Chair, I make a motion do pass and send this thing on the rules, and let's get it moving.
And then number 23?
I've actually got a parliamentary inquiry.
Yes.
Madam Chair.
Wait, well, we have a due pass. Before I entertain the parliamentary inquiry, I need a second. Thank you. Okay. And then I have number 23 and then number 23. Okay.
Thank you.
Yes.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And again, I hope my question doesn't come across as not being supportive of the legislation, because I certainly am, but just a little bit of confusion. Section 3 indicates that this would become effective upon a constitutional amendment, so some of us are wondering why we don't have two pieces of legislation, one which would be the constitutional amendment, one of which would be enabling legislation, if someone could address that.
So essentially to that question, usually your actual constitutional amendments go through the Ways and Means process. So that is on the the body of the Ways and Means. The effective date of that constitutional amendment is 2018. This bill is a descriptive bill that will go with the constitutional amendment. And so this bill's process is either the Senate and the House or the House and the Senate. And then potentially a conference committee. So this bill is moving its way through the process, and it's my understanding the constitutional amendment will be taken up next year, 2018. But that is an important question. Thank you. Did that generate any other questions? So we have a motion and a second, and we've had some discussion. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, I will go ahead and call for the vote. All those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Any opposed? You have your bill. Good luck on your journey.
Thank you,
Getting
Madam
this
Chair, members
passed.
of the
Thank
committee.
you. Thank you. So part B of our committee meeting today is that we have some bills that are generating a lot of issues, concerns, or actually these bills are trying to address issues and concerns surrounding the new problem that all our states are dealing with is in how to carefully manage the disposal of coal ash and how it affects our communities. And we're not the only state doing this, but before we get to this part of our meeting, I want to tell you both these bills rest still in the subcommittees because there is still a lot of debate and discussion going on with these bills, but I'm receiving a lot of questions from all my committee members, and so to help our committee with understanding of these bills and give them the ability to track what's going on, I decided to go ahead and have a use our full committee process to have a hearing on these bills. And I see that the author is there. But before I do that, I want to thank everybody who comes to me afterwards. First of all, what I've heard is we're in no way ready to have a debate on these bills and to call for a vote because it is very complicated. So we will, in a minute, Representative Jones, get to your bills. But sometimes our job as legislators is to listen, to learn, to study the issues, and then we're at the right posture to take votes on our issues. And so we have some relatively new legislators on our committee, and part of that is that they're not quite familiar with some of the process that has occurred before. So I want to tell our committee that in 2016, this natural resource and then the signing the law by the governor, House Bill 1028, originated in the House and passed the Senate and was signed by the governor. And the author was Representative Workhauser. The other signers were several, but Nimmer, Burns, Abrams, and Caldwell are the names that are printed on this document. But when it says the word others, it involves several other people. So I want those who are listening to us have this debate today, and to those in our audience and to those of us here, to understand that sometimes a situation is evolving. And our first measure was a good, sound measure that we passed as a body. And essentially, I will repeat it for you again. The owner or operator of a municipal solid waste landfill shall notify the local governing authorities of any city and county in which such landfill is located of any release from the site of such landfill of a contaminant which is likely to pose a danger to human health. In addition, such owner or operator shall cause notice of such release to be published in the legal organ of the county in which such landfill is located. Compliance with the requirements of this code section shall occur within 14 days of confirmation of such release by the division. So what I'm trying to tell you here is that you've already done something, and you're on your way to studying the situation more and to see if there's more that needs to be done. So if you get the sense today as we're listening to this, you need to also remember that you have, in fact, taken some positive actions to address this issue. With that in mind, and as I see that after Representative Jones does his presentations, I feel it's important to let the committee know that I do see this as an ongoing concern, and I know that we care as members of the General Assembly about quality of life for the citizens of our state. And with that in mind, I'm going to tell you right now, and I have the right as chair of this committee to appoint ad hoc committees. So I'm asking my subcommittee chairs who are hearing these bills, both Representative Hardin and Williams, and then I'm asking Representative Chad Nimmer to serve on what I'm calling my ad hoc committee to address the concerns that are still evolving and developing around all the different aspects of understanding the disposal of coal ash. I also want to take this time right now to publicly thank EPD and Georgia Power for their availability, for their willingness to engage with us throughout this process. I want to point out that the state of Georgia is one of your first states stepping forward and making positive steps in dealing with this situation. So as the concerns are there, and we are going to look at these concerns and continue to look at them, I think it's an error on our part if we don't recognize the good work of the people who have done the good work already, including you as a body. You've already passed some legislation. For me, I will tell you right now, as I'm listening to these debates, a question keeps coming back to me. If and our largest processor of coal ash disposal is Georgia Power. If we have Georgia Power and EPD talking to us, if we pass legislation dealing with announcements, what have we not done as we're going along? And one of the things, and I've dealt with this for several years now, we respect local control of our local governments. We do. We all defend that. But maybe we're having a larger question now before us. When does the action of a local government become a state problem? And we might be having to answer that right now, because we've got one local government that exercised its right and has not broken a law in doing what it's done. But it is negatively impacting or has raised several concerns by neighboring counties. And so at that point in time, to me, a local government's actions might become a statewide concern. And that's one thing I want you to keep in mind as we're going through. I'm not saying get rid of home rule. I'm saying as a state elected official who takes an oath for all of Georgia, one of the things I want you to consider in this debate, do we also need to shift some of our studying and concerns to our role as the state when our local government's actions that are not wrong, not illegal, but can impact other counties and therefore the state. So please keep that in mind as we move forward on this debate and as this ad hoc committee begins to work. And I have a feeling I'm going to be giving it several charges other than the ones specifically stated here. So with all of that, thank you for your patience. Representative Jones, if you will come forward. And this is a full committee, and the bills are still being heard in subcommittee, and that is where the public comment will take place. This hearing is being held at the request of several of our committee members, full committee, who want to just know a little bit more about the issue. So if you will go ahead and present. Thank you. I think what we'll do, just so you won't, and time is always a factor, if you will present both your bills, and then we'll, as we as committee members ask our questions, let's just remember to make notes and refer back to whichever bill is of concern. And I didn't mean to do that to our director of GFA, so I'm going to put on notice right now, EPD, that we will be calling you forward to help clarify some things for our committee. So please present.
Thank you, Madam Chair and committee members. Felt like I was gonna have to take the blame for getting everybody up early this morning on our off day to deal with this committee hearing, but I guess I can blame Sam for that. I'm just a tag along. Give me just a second, Madam Chair, to pull out my
While
folder.
you're doing that, my committee analyst just pointed out to me, so since this is a hearing, in our folders today, we have your original bill and your substitute bill. So you will have 388 and 387. You'll have the first bill is introduced, and then a smaller 8.511 version of the substitute. So you'll maybe you want to keep them side by side as we listen to this. Thank you. Did I give you enough time?
Yes, ma'am. I just
Okay.
had to get my folders out.
All
Thank
right,
you.
me too. Thank you.
Again, thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you, committee members, for taking the interest in hearing about the issue of coal ash in Georgia. By way of a bit of introduction, the federal government, and Chairman Smith did a very good job of laying the groundwork for our discussion and my presentation this morning. So again, thank you, Madam Chair. The federal government issued edicts a little bit time ago, not that long ago, that all coal ash ponds must be closed. And I want to insert here, as I will probably a couple times during my presentation this morning, that there have been no laws broken in the state of Georgia regarding the handling, treatment, discharge of coal ash. Georgia Power in particular, I want to emphasize, has been an excellent corporate citizen. They have exceeded the requirements, they have anticipated the requirements, and have moved ahead and moved far ahead of what any law, whether it be federal or state, has required regarding the proper closure of ponds or the receipt of coal ash. So again, no laws have been broken. What I'm trying to achieve here is to take a next step with how do we deal with what are massive, massive quantities of coal ash that exist in the state of Georgia. And what has predicated some of this discussion today is many of you may have heard or know about the Broadhurst landfill situation in Wayne County in Jessup. And to Madam Chair's point, this body, this committee, the House and Senate, did pass a law back in 2016 regarding public notice in the local organ. But key to that notice is that that notice is only required after contamination is discovered. What has happened in the Jessup community is that that community received no prior notification of the public at large. Let me clarify. The public at large received no notification of Republic Industry, the Broadhurst landfill's intent to begin receiving, as I said, what are massive quantities of coal ash. The local authority was indeed notified, as is required by law. The local authority chose not to take that information and share it with the public. Hence the problem that we have today. Just to put some of this in perspective, the Broadhurst landfill currently receives 1,800 tons today of just regular household trash that comes out of Glenn County, for example, my home. The plan for the Broadhurst landfill by Republic was to move 10,000 tons per day of coal ash from the Duke Power's power production facilities in North Carolina. That amounts to a plan to move 40 million tons from North Carolina into Georgia, again, without public notice within the communities there. And this is of an estimated 110 million total tons of coal ash that exist in North Carolina. So the effort that I have undertaken is to take steps back in the coal ash process, if you will, to require some advance notifications of how, number one, coal ash ponds are closed, and that involves an effort of what's called dewatering. Dewatering simply is draining of the ponds of the coal ash water and discharging that water through the dewatering process into state waters. The second aspect of my bills is to require, and again, Georgia Power, as our public utility, has been disposing of their coal ash over the years on their own property in coal ash ponds that they own and operate and manage. The Broadhurst landfill is a non-public utility municipal solid waste landfill. They currently are eligible, or able rather, to accept coal ash without any required pre-public notice to the community. So I chose to break this effort down into two separate bills. First, regarding the dewatering, and that's HB 387, and that bill strictly covers Georgia Power's efforts to close their coal ash ponds. So 387, just in summary, just says that the water coming out of these ponds, before it is discharged into state waters, and the analogy I'll use for you this morning is that we want that water to be at least as clean as the gray water that is discharged from our sewer wastewater treatment plants. Current law, current EPD regulations only require that Georgia Power test for pH, total dissolved solids, total suspended solids, oil and grease. There is no requirement in current law, code, regulation, edict, guideline, or any guidance document that requires Georgia Power to test and treat for the long list of heavy metals that exist in coal ash water by its very nature. So HB 387 sought to define and describe the process by which that water must be tested and treated before being discharged into state waters. It also includes some measures regarding the testing of the water, the coal ash water itself, and the testing of the state waters above stream, at the discharge points, and at the downstream points. The legislation also would have required that there be very specific indications in the dewatering plans of the location of public water intakes that exist near the discharge points of the coal ash water. Excuse me just a moment. And I'll come back to the specifics of that bill in just a moment. HB 388, the purpose of that bill is to establish that municipal solid waste, whether they be public or private, that they be required to follow the same procedures that currently exist and are in place for Georgia Power's handling of coal ash in their personally owned property landfills. Currently, there is only a statement in EPD DNR regulations that says a coal ash management plan must be prepared. There is no detail in any of that information as to what that CCR landfill or disposal requirement is. So 388 simply, if you will, in a complex subject, outlines and mirrors that these non-utility MSWs be required to provide and produce a detailed disposal plan, just as Georgia Power is currently required to do. So in my mind, in presenting 388, this bill has no effect whatsoever on Georgia Power, except for in prior discussions, and I've been talking with Georgia Power quite extensively over the past many months, Georgia Power anticipates, and they won't really know until they complete their pond closure process, but Georgia Power anticipates that no more than 10% of the now dried coal ash coming from their ponds would be required to be disposed in municipal solid waste landfills other than those owned and operated by Georgia Power. So again, in my mind, 388 merely levels the playing field so that the private MSWs, such as Broadhurst in Jessup, Wayne County, that landfill be required to produce a detailed management plan as to how they intend to handle the receipt and ongoing management testing, groundwater testing, et cetera, of the the CCR coal ash that they are planning to receive. So again, as I approach this subject, I would think that Georgia Power would want to expect that these landfills that they use, or perhaps would use, would want to be following the same procedures that they, as a public utility, are required to handle as far as the management plan of the CCR. Again, knowing this is in many ways a complex subject, but where we are today, obviously Friday is crossover day, so only those bills that come out of committee and are brought before rules and are approved to be on the calendar will have any opportunity to be voted on. So what I really hope to achieve at this late stage in our legislative process as we approach crossover day is to change and add a requirement by law that there be public notice in addition to the posting on EPD's websites and in addition to the notification to the local governing authorities, but that there be required by statute true public notification. And the best avenue we have today to do that is for the publication of ads in the local newspaper or legal organs, as they're quite often called. Currently, again, there are no laws, rules, regulations, guidance documents, guidelines, whatever you want to call them, that require this public notice prior to the acceptance, prior to an MSW's acceptance of coal ash, or prior to the discharge of the coal ash water into state waters. Again, as I said, it kind of in my opening remarks, the law passed a couple of years ago requires such notification only after contamination is found. And I would submit to the committee that there needs to be public notification prior to an MSW's acceptance of coal ash. I would submit to the committee that there needs to be public notification prior to the discharge of contaminated waters coming from the draining of our coal ash ponds into state waters. And to that end, again, knowing that my two bills are still in subcommittee, and I've subjected the subcommittee members to probably 3 or 4 hours of presentations and testimony, so I thank you for the patience that the subcommittee chairs and the Natural Resources Committee chair have offered me in the presentations of these two bills. But again, where we are today is those bills are not going to move out of committee. They're not going to be on the rules calendar. There is no opportunity for our full body House to vote on those bills. So again, what I would hope to achieve today is perhaps a little bit out of the ordinary, but to accept substitutes, a combined substitute, in fact, of 388 that in simple language simply adds or states, and no other details other than this, but simply requires that there be public notice. As I said, I'm repeating myself, I realize, but that there be public notice prior to an MSW accepting coal ash, that there be public notice prior to the discharge of the dewater into state waters. I had an appointment set with Commissioner Dunn yesterday afternoon at 4 o'clock, and foolishly thinking we would be out of session by then to be able to make that hearing, but we ran long and I was not able to do so. So late yesterday afternoon, I sent an email to Director Dunn and explained that we were in session. I wasn't going to make the meetings, and my appropriate apologies and such. So I said what I'd like to achieve or to have achieved in our meeting today is simple. I would like a solid, irrevocable commitment by EPD that you will provide 30 days advance notice to the public and local governments before, number one, the start of any dewatering from a coal ash pond, 2, the initial receipt of any CCR at an MSW landfill. And I asked that EPD be able to make that presentation today in this committee hearing of their intent to do so. Director Dunn, again, kind of late in the day yesterday, responded with a good response, and I thank him and his staff for doing that. But without reading his response, again, all EPD is currently required to do is to provide a notification to the local governing authorities prior to discharge of water, prior to an MSW's acceptance of the coal ash. So Director Dunn's response was an affirmation that that was going to be and continue to be their position, a notification of the local governing authorities of those two aspects of where we are in this coal ash process, both the receipt of new coal ash into MSWs and the closure of Georgia Power's coal ash ponds. So unfortunately, and again, I understand EPD's position. They don't make law. We do. The House does, various committees, and then we move them through the legislative process. So EPD's hands are tied in that they cannot require or initiate a public notice be published in the local governing organs. That public notice piece is what was so key and missing with this. I'm gonna editorialize here with the Broadhurst fiasco, in that, again, the community was not made aware prior to the contract being signed to receive, and I want to emphasize this, 10,000 tons per day is the plan for Republic's movement of coal ash into the Broadhurst landfill. With that, Madam Chair, I'm happy to go into the details of what these two bills entail, but it's fairly lengthy and complex, and we don't want to go here till noon on that. But
Well, we won't have the room till noon. We have a few
Thank
other
goodness.
legislators that work up here. What we'll do now after your bill presentation, I'll ask you if you'll just sit over there, and then we're going to put you on the podium to give you a chance to answer, because I think our water and land division people will come sit here and make their presentations, and then we'll go to a question and answer format from our committee. I would love to require and demand of a lot of different state agencies different things, but I found out that road works both ways. When I was first elected, I had my constituents demand that I do something about the Board of Education, demand that I do something about the traffic ticket, demand that I do all kind of things about what they owe the Department of Revenue. So that demand road sounds good, it just doesn't work. So thought I'd point that out. We're a body, and the body works, informs, and determines its legislation.
yes, ma'am, I agree with you, Madam Chair.
I want to thank you for your initiative in bringing this forward to us, but we'll now turn this section of our hearing over to EPD. And just so you don't have to stand, if you'll just sit over there, then if the committee has questions for the three of y'all, we'll do that. Now, in respect, we do have more time today. We had asked for that, but if our committee members have other meetings, we're getting close to the 9 o'clock time when we normally adjourn. So my goal here is to have us adjourn around 9:30. So I just want to ask you, like I joked today about the 15th, is this the hot seat or not? I'm just curious. So I guess the first bill that was brought, well, let's start with 388, which is a bill in resource management. I think that's yours, Mr. Cowan. So,
Yes, thank you, Madam
okay,
Chair.
all right.
Thank you,
And,
committee.
and let me get our committee to that bill. So we're looking at Bill 388. And you have two versions of that bill in your packet, but essentially we're not specifically going over bill language. We're just discussing, I guess, the things that you can testify to. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'm Jeff Cowan. I'm Chief of the Land Protection Branch for the Environmental Protection Division. Appreciate the opportunity to speak on coal combustion residuals. We did DNR Board of Natural Resources passed rules concerning coal combustion residuals in 2016. They went into effect in November of 2016 after the federal EPA passed rules in 2015. And a component of that, far as concerned with municipal solid waste landfills, the rule requires that a municipal solid waste landfill now, if they accept CCR, that they must submit to us a CCR management plan. And this is new, and so in order to focus on the things we need in that CCR management plan, we created guidance that we've sent out in December of 2016 talking about the things that should be included to try to level the playing field of what the electric utilities would have to do with their coal combustion residual ponds. And this guidance can be quickly revised if we need to. And also the rule required that the permittee that's going to accept the CCR must notify the local government that they propose to do so. That isn't in the rules, and it's in the guidance as well. The guidance includes more groundwater monitoring based on the constituents in CCR. It requires control of the dust, design standards, how it might affect the landfill. All these things are in the rule, and in the guidance, and we can revise that. And as Representative Jones stated, that EPD is willing to also put a notice out when we receive a CCR management plan and place that on our website that we've received that, so that the public can be able to see that it's been submitted. So I'd be happy to answer any questions on the further parts of this, our rule, the CCR guidance, anything that y'all would like. And I do appreciate Representative Chairwoman Smith talking about House Bill 1028. We worked very diligently with Representative Werkhauser last year and Representative Nimmer, former Senator Tommy Williams and all to work on that and got that bill through, and we appreciate, and we are implementing that as well today.
Thank you. So I do believe this would be, let's use our time now. We'll direct questions to you since that's the category you're in, then we'll go to you. And so to my committee, this is the proper time to ask questions, Representative Cowan, of any statements you might need clarification on or further information on. And we're talking about land management. Okay, number 22. So state your name and then we'll go around the room.
Dan Gasaway, House District 28. Thank you, Madam Chairwoman. My question is a request, and I mentioned it when we met in December. If there's any way we could get a heads up as legislators as well, just not in law, not in rules, just a simple request, because as I shared with you, although my county commissioners did receive notification about the landfill 4 miles from my home receiving all the CCR, they told me it was going to be construction debris from the city of Greenville. So it would always be good, just as a political component of this as well, for us to know what's coming our way, because when it began to happen, the first thing that appeared on Facebook is how in the world could our state representative have allowed this to happen? So it'd be handy to know that before the darts start flying. So that's just all I have to say. I understand the situation well. I think that y'all are. I attended one of your hearings down by the airport on this back in the summer, I believe it was.
Yes, sir.
So I know that we're working through a unique issue, and I feel like we're doing a good job. I just have that one simple request.
Yes, Representative Guys, as we talked about in Athens, as far as our procedures on implementing this, we hope to include the representative that's in the area of the landfill. Yes, sir.
Just so we can start dodging.
Or not be recycled. Let's see. Number 23.
Madam Chair, Representative Chuck Williams, House District 119. Mr. Cowan, you mentioned under the current guidance a requirement that the permittee provide notice to the local government, I believe is what I heard you say. Is that correct?
Yes, sir. It is in the guidance, but is also in the rules for solid waste management. So it is a rule requirement.
Okay, so it's sort of belt and suspenders. The question I would have with short notice to you is what would EPD's posture be on adding a legal organ requirement, if you will, to that guidance and that rule, which in effect would address what Representative Jones has proposed to be done legislatively? Is that something that has been given any thought or could be given thought?
So now we have a hot podium, so the mic's on.
Good morning, Representative Williams. Rick Dunn, Director of EPD. This is something new for us. Traditionally, on notification and legal organ, it's the responsibility of the permittee. We don't do any announcements in legal organs or things like that. What we'd offered to Representative Jones is make an announcement on our website, which we think the news would eventually filter down and get to folks through various people. If the citizens themselves were not looking at the website, certainly advocacy groups, reporters, and things like that would be looking at the website, and that information could get down. But we could certainly explore the mechanism that we would take as the regulators to actually look at that purchasing an announcement in the local organ. Again, it's not something we're used to doing. Again, traditionally, it's been on the responsibility of the permittee to do so.
Yes.
Yeah, and really my point was rather than EPD providing or buying that notice in the legal organ, if you will, requiring the permittee, in addition to requiring them to notify the local governments, requiring them to run the notice in the legal organ.
We can certainly look at our authority to do so and get back with the committee.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you. Number 16.
Debbie Buckner, House District 137. I agree with the notice conversation and wish that we could let people know these are very volatile topics in communities. But my question goes back to the rules that you mentioned, and I'm a little confused. I'm thinking that there was another EPD rule that had been passed, and I'm confused regarding CCR, and I'm confused about whether that rule, and I asked this in one of the other meetings, does it apply to your municipal solid waste landfills and your commercial, like industrial landfills? I want to make sure that these rules have taken care of what's put in any landfill of any type. It's done the same way as we're requiring Georgia Power to do it in a very safe manner.
Yes, ma'am. The rule we passed in 2016 goes in Rule 10, which only talks about CCR units at electric utilities. But that rule's requirements for municipal solid waste landfill have been in the rules for solid waste management since 1993. It's the same design criteria, the same operational criteria, other than the very specifics to CCR. That's why we added in there that a CCR management plan that would get the rest of those requirements. But the design standards, the separation from groundwater, all these things have been in rule for municipal solid waste and commercial industrial landfills in Georgia rules since 1993.
Okay, so, I'm trying to find the reference number, I'm sorry. It seems like it was something like Rule 391, 3, 4, 10, yada, 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 probably.
Yes, ma'am. The rules for solid waste management are Chapter 391-3-4.
Okay,
It contains 20 separate rules in there.
okay,
Rule 10 is specific to CCR units at electric utilities.
okay.
Rule 1 through 20 applies to municipal solid waste landfills, commercial industrial landfills, construction demolition landfills, and CCR units. So the whole rule package applies to municipal landfills. And those criteria, both for the CCR units and the municipal solid waste units, came from a federal rule that went into effect in '91. And it's the Subtitle D regulations for municipal solid waste landfills, and it applies the same siting and design standards to both units.
So for all landfills?
All landfills, yes, ma'am.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And number 19?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And maybe I'm a little behind or something here now. Did, Madam Chair, you mentioned there was a law that required, publication in the local organ, earlier. Did this not apply to the coal ash?
I believe, well, we passed it last year and went to notification, but I'm going to defer to Jeff Cowan, your question to him.
Please.
House Bill 1028 that was passed last session applied to all landfills if they had a release of a constituent that had a potential for impact to human health. So if there was something released from the landfill and it left the property, the permittee had to notify the local government and had to place that in the legal organ. So there was a release from the site. It could have a landfill with coal ash in it or not coal ash. All the landfills that had a release from them that could impact human health had to do this notification.
Well, and I guess then that may make me understand why I was trying to decide, did the local government that has been talked about this morning actually break the law? They were the permittee of a landfill, and they were accepting all of this coal ash, but they did not run an ad in the local organ. Did they break the law at that point, I guess was my question.
No, so there was no requirement prior to our rules that went into effect November 22nd, 2016, that any landfill notified that they were going to accept coal ash. We placed that in the rule last year, working with our stakeholders. But the House Bill 1028 was only from a release, so if a contaminant was released from the landfill.
All right, thank you. That's
Number 14, was there a question? Okay. Number 14.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I accidentally was fixing to jump in on the question directed to Mr. Cowan. I apologize for that. I was trying to help.
Okay,
Representative
thank you.
Harden.
Trying to, okay, I don't see any other questions. And again, this is a hearing, okay? Now I have a question. Number 14.
Sorry, Madam Chair, I did, it sounds to me like we continue to have a lot of confusion about where we've been, where we are. I think to Representative Buckner's question about what landfills, if certain ones or all, are applied under Rule 10. I'm not going to cite all the numbers and code sections, but under Rule 10. And maybe one of the things, Madam Chair, and I know you'll give us a pretty straight line directive, but that we could go in there and clarify what is in rule, what is the new amended rules, and what erased each other and what complemented each other moving forward. And I think give some idea to House Bill 1028 from last year. Make sure everybody understands that's not a prior to the receiving of any residuals. That is the release of. So that's notification after a problem's been detected to local governments. And then what is the true requirement of the local government? I think where we're going today is really, in a way, complementing EPD and the utilities and every stakeholder from every organization that's been engaged in this, in the efforts up to this point, and the distance we've traveled together to try to make us safer and line up legally and in a safe manner. But there still seems to be mass confusion as to where we actually are. And Madam Chair, if I could, by way of request to you, make that one of our directives in this task force is just some strict clarity as to exactly where we are and who rules apply to and what the notification process is. And Madam Chair, if I may, one more thing, if I could ask a question of Mr. Count, is that?
Yes.
Mr. Count, if I just want to make sure I heard you right prior to Director Dunn coming up. I think when Representative Jones was in the process of talking about the notification prior to any receivables coming in, you made the comment that EPD is continuing to be open to amend current plan and rule if that's what needs to happen based upon safety issues. Did I hear you right on that?
That's correct, Representative Nimmer.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. And to Representative Nimmer's points, actually, Chair is open to receiving any suggestions from committee members as we're going forward as to what direction you want us to delve into these issues. And so now we go to our Water Branch Director, Director Cap.
Yeah, Jack Cap, I'm the Chief of EPD's Watershed Protection Branch, and I'll try to be very brief. There's two primary concerns that we have with the bill language as it currently stands. And so the first one relates to the fact that all of these facilities are permitted. There is an existing regulatory process that is required under that permit that EPD is implementing that is working. So Representative Jones, I think, accurately summarized what was in those Georgia Power permits prior to dewatering. But what he didn't say was what EPD is doing under the permits to address dewatering. And that's exactly what we're here talking about, is how to address dewatering. And so those permits require the permittee to give EPD notice that a change is occurring at the facility. That permit also authorizes EPD to require them to submit any information that EPD needs to assess that change. And that's what EPD has done. And so in the two cases where dewatering has already commenced, which is at Plant McManus and Plant McDonough, EPD has required and is requiring the permittee to do sampling at the discharge point for 21 constituents, including the heavy metals that we are concerned about for water quality purposes. And we are requiring them to do sampling upstream and downstream of their discharge. So that regulatory process is working. We are receiving that data as we speak. We're looking at that data. We haven't seen any problems as of yet. We will continue to look at that data and make sure that water quality is protected. EPD has the authority and the discretion to modify that permit if it's appropriate. And that gets me into my second point, which is under current law and regulation, it's EPD that determines if a permit modification is necessary and appropriate. And this bill takes away the director's authority and discretion to modify a permit if he thinks it's appropriate and requires him to modify the permit. So first of all, we think that that's likely unnecessary in this situation. But secondly, this is a federally delegated program. And so when we modify one of these permits, we don't follow state law, we follow federal law. And so there's ambiguity here in requiring EPD to modify the permit because the bill language is ambiguous as to what type of process EPD would have to follow. And that is something that we believe could be called into question by EPA or the public if we were to choose a certain route. And under federal regulation, EPA or the public thought we should have chosen a different federal route. And so with that, I'd be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. This is proper time for our committee to ask any questions. Number 16.
Thank you. So the permits that you're referring to that are federal, are those the MPDES type permits?
Yes.
Or pollution discharge?
Yes.
Okay. And those are incorporated in the plans of all of those ponds, and how, when you're using that as the model for all of the plans, I mean, for all of the ponds that?
What I described as the permit requires notice of any changes. And then the permit, and so that's happening, right? They're going from not dewatering to dewatering. That's a change that they're required to notify us of. In response to that notification, EPD is requiring information related to that change to assess whether or not we need to modify that permit. And that information that we are requiring them to submit are the 21 constituents that I described in the effluent discharge itself and upstream and downstream. And then with that information, EPD will determine if a permit modification is needed.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Number 14.
Thank you, Madam. Thank you, Madam Chair. Thank you again for being here one more time and to answer questions. I'm sure now that we've got an ad hoc committee, there's going to be a bunch more, so be prepared. How far, I'm just curious, I know you talk about monitoring upstream and downstream. What's the radius in which you gauge? Is it according to a fallout area? I've heard 10 miles. Is that for some reason?
No, you want it to be a lot closer than that. And really what you're trying to gauge from that is to ascertain what the impact of the discharge is. So the further you go upstream and downstream of the discharge, you're going to have other potential sources of pollutants.
Yeah.
So you want it to be close upstream and downstream.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you. And number 23.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Mr. Cap, can you just give us sort of a visual mind's picture, if you will? If in a dewatering process, we already have some of these underway. I'm trying to visualize that. Does it look like a portable sanitary sewer treatment plant? Is it a continuous effluent outflow once dewatering is going, or is it a slug of processed water that goes into a stream and then days or weeks later another slug of water goes in? What does the process sort of resemble?
Well, yeah, so the pollutants of concern here are a little bit different than the pollutants in a municipal system, so it's going to be different in that regard. But yeah, you've got a train of equipment that's designed to do different things with that water. When it's operating, it'll operate continuously, but the water is being pulled from the ponds, so there's some control as to when and how long you do that. It's different if when the water is coming into the municipal system, it's going out of the municipal system rather quickly. That's not really the case here. The water's in the pond, and so they have some discretion as to when they operate the system. But when it's operating, it would have a continuous discharge.
Thank you. And at this point in time, I will call on you in just a minute, Representative, to draw your closing remarks. But again, I hope the committee is aware of the work that is actually being done by EPD. I feel like some days I wake up every morning, the first thing I do is put a target on my back and go through the day to see how many times I get hit. I think y'all continuously wear the targets on your back. And so I appreciate the professionalism and the integrity that you show to the citizens of Georgia and to us as legislators during this process. And I believe this ad hoc committee is going to delve into a lot of things, but maybe the point of all of this is to find out ways to provide better clarity for us and the citizens. And as Representative Gazaway says, please let us know before we get hit, right? Okay. And so, Representative Jones, if you'll draw a conclusion, before you do, I want to make a comment. When you're a new legislator or when you're new to watching the legislative process, the first thing you think should happen is that you should have bills, and these bills should identify and recognize your achievements as a legislator or carrying the initiative. A lot of what takes place is not so much the passage of a bill, but the way we identify, discuss, debate, and handle an issue. And as you can see, there needs to be flexibility down the process for our state agencies to do their work. So to me, we don't sew on a badge because we passed a bill. We wear the suit of armor that we are effective leaders for our state. And I want just to bring that back to our legislators and to those who are listening here. So if your demand to your legislator is, we want you to pass a bill such and such, your legislator looks around and thinks, well, that takes 90 more votes for me to be able to do that. And then you start getting your questions. So to the general public, it is more important that we look at and address our issues. And if policy needs to be passed, it will be done, but we are a body. We work in connection with everyone. And so I want to tell Representative Jones, by way of letting him conclude here, he's done an excellent job of bringing forward some very serious issues. And if you don't ever walk away with an Eagle Scout badge that you passed a bill, that doesn't mean you did not achieve some remarkable things. So, and I hope those who are behind you on this issue take a moment and realize that. So, Representative Jones, if you'll just draw a conclusion. Thank you.
Are we hot here?
Yes.
Before I wrap up and conclude, I do need to clarify. Director Cap is referring to about 3 versions ago, the requirement that a major modification be made by EPD or by the Georgia Power was removed some time ago in versions. Again, the purpose being to allow EPD the flexibility to require that, but in doing so, to require Georgia Power to create a dewatering plan and then incorporate that dewatering plan into their NPDES permit. That's a National Pollutant Discharge Elimination System permit. But the discretion was left with EPD to decide whether or not a major modification was required. So I do need to clarify that. The other clarification is that, again, currently, where we are today, given the time frame, is that we are still left with the public not being notified prior to the release of water into a state water. We are still left with no prior notification of the public that a MSW is planning to receive coal ash into the local community. And I think where I am today, and Chairman Smith, you're exactly correct. This is a process. I know that. This is my 3rd year, and I've had a number of bills that I've tried to work through. This is a process, work through, compromise, and come up with legislation, if the legislation is even necessary, that hopefully solves a clearly identifiable problem. And in this case, I think the fact that coal ash is a major issue in our state, both the closing of ponds and the receipt of coal ash into MSWs from other states, those are issues that we are facing today. My concern is, if we don't require a public notice period now, is that the public will continue to be not notified prior to releases of coal ash water. They will not be notified prior to a local community's MSW accepting coal ash. And that's where we are today. And again, Director Dunn mentioned that they would study that, but I think we're at a point where we don't want another Broadhurst to occur in this state. We need public notification prior to acceptance, prior to release. So I thank the committee for your time and look forward to the study process over the off session.
Thank you very much. My thanks to all the ones who sat or stood before the committee with their presentations. My thanks to the committee for your time. I had a lot of you ask me, since it's an interim day, do we still need to meet at 8 o'clock? And so I want to thank you for being here at 8 o'clock, and thanks to all of you who are in the audience watching us today. Appreciate your participation as well. We stand adjourned.